Sure, Dave. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all. I would normally be at the Zendo, but I was possibly exposed to COVID about a little over a week ago. And so just to be entirely safe, I'm staying at home today. I've tested negative several times and I don't think I have it, but never, it's not I'd rather be safe than sorry in this case. In any event, good morning, and I'm going to start with a reading that I think you might find kind of interesting. So this is an interaction between two of the ancestors in our particular lineage, Jayata and Vasudandhu. So Vasudandhu is a very famous figure in Buddhism, Indian and also Tibetan Buddhism. And I recommend that at some point you Google Vasudandhu and see if you can understand it. There's some very, very intense, kind of technically intellectual, but also really deep treatises that he wrote on enlightenment and different aspects of Buddhism of the time. So in this case, though, what I'd like to focus on is Jayata in his interaction with Vasudandhu when they met for the first time. Jayata, there's not as much known about, but he obviously was quite a preeminent master in his own right. So this piece is called Zen Patriarch Jayata Embarrasses Buddhist Monks and Converts Their Leader. The 20th Indian Patriarch Jayata was from a kingdom in northern India. His wisdom and knowledge were deep, his instruction and guidance beyond reckoning. In later years, he went to the city of Rajagarhya, where he expounded the sudden teaching. There were many scholars there who only valued debating. Their leader was Vasudandhu, which means everywhere active. So the name Vasudandhu means everywhere active. He always took one meal a day, never lay down to sleep, and prostrated to the Buddha 6 times daily. The master Jayata wished to liberate him, so he first asked Vasudandhu's followers, "This everywhere action is disciplined and can practice pure living, but is he able to attain the Buddha way?" His followers answered, "Our teacher makes great efforts, so why should he be unable to?" "Your teacher is far from the way," said the master. "Even supposing that he kept on practicing for as many kalpas as there have been atoms in the universe so far, all is on a false foundation." "What meritorious practices has the master accumulated that he jeers at our teacher?" responded his followers. "I do not seek the way, but neither do I go against it," said the master. "I do not worship Buddha, but neither am I haughty nor superficial. I do not sit long in meditation, but neither am I negligent. I may not eat just one meal a day, yet I do not overindulge. Even though I do not know what enough is, I am not greedy. In my heart, there are no expectations. This is called the way." When Vasubandhu heard this, he gave rise to wisdom without outflows and joyfully praised the master. "Do you understand my words or not?" the master asked the assembly once more. "The reason for my acting like this was on account of his heart's urge to search the way. He is like a string on a musical instrument, too tense, and it breaks. Therefore, I didn't praise him by letting him settle in an easy place, but had him enter the wisdom of all the Buddhas. I just curbed you in front of your followers," continued the master to everywhere action, or Vasubandhu. "Did you attain to the state of not fretting about that in your heart of hearts?" "My only wish is, out of your great compassion, to pass on instruction in this wonderful dharma." said Vasubandhu. You have cultivated many virtues for a long time, said the master, and you will continue my teaching. Listen to my gatha. A gatha is an awakening poem. So this is his poem. To be in union with the unborn through one word is to be united with the nature of the Dharma realm. If one can be liberated like this, penetration of relative and absolute is complete. So, pretty long story, but I thought it was quite an interesting interaction. This is a longer piece of what appears in a different translation in shorter form in the koan collection that we use called Transmitting the Light. Transmitting the Light was put together from other sources by Master Kazon, who was the third generation master past Dogen, who studied in Japan. And he attempted to link together all different masters from the past into a cogent lineage. It's said primarily to promote the Dogen Zen school as the kind of ultimate or best school in Japan at that time. There was evidently quite a bit of conflict between different schools as to who would become favored by the ruling class. And in Japan at that time, the ruling class determined who was able to have a school or who was able to have monasteries. You couldn't just start one without the support of the local lord or daimyo, as they were called in Japan. So to go back to this story of Jayata, this takes place in ancient India, where Buddhism is said to have started, northern India at least. And it starts out by saying that Jayata is an adherent or a practitioner of the sudden method or the sudden school. And this could be something that was added in by somebody in China later, because at that time there was, in China that is, much later than this would have taken place, maybe as much as 800 years or so later, there was quite a bit of, you might say conflict, but certainly debate between the northern and southern schools of Zen. One of the schools was the one that believed primarily in sudden awakening, and the other was the school that would become more like the Soto school in Japan, which is where the Soto school is derived from, which was the gradual school. So right away, you know that this guy is someone who is coming from a perspective of sudden awakening upon hearing the Dharma, in this case, provided one is at a place where one is ready to receive it. This is the important thing in terms of interactions between teachers and students throughout the history of Zen, is that awakening happens when the person is ready, when the student or the practitioner is ready to hear it. And there's many ways that we can become awakened to what reality is. Any of the sense gates, as they're called, and there are 6, the normal senses, seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, tasting, all those, and then thinking, which is considered the 6th sense in Buddhist theory. So this would be the awakening that Vasubandhu had, would be considered the awakening through hearing. In this case, hearing the Dharma as preached by Jayata, who eventually became, shortly after that, became his teacher, and also Vasubandhu became his successor. So there's a few things that I find really interesting about this interaction. I find the name Vasubandhu, everywhere active, as being kind of amusing in a sense. Some of us may feel like everywhere active in our lives. And with Zen maybe being the antidote to being everywhere active, And so I thought that was kind of interesting. And Jayata kind of plays on this, he's basically panning or criticizing Vasubandhu, and who's considered to be the teacher of this sect or this group at the time. But it's also said that his followers are into debate quite a bit. In other words, there's a lot of intellectual debate going on about different points of the Dharma. And when Jayata admonishes these practitioners, he says, it doesn't, your teacher's a long ways from understanding what I'm talking about. Even if he kept on practicing for as many kalpas as there have been atoms in the universe so far, it's not going to work. So one thing that always fascinates me, and this story points it out, is that interesting time when our mind turns or flips and we see something clearly that we didn't see before. I call that an awakening. And awakenings, in my experience, can happen in many different forms through many different methods, or no method at all, no perceivable method. But we're just ready for it. And when we're ready and we're keeping an open mind, and there's a certain quality, you could say, of doubt in the background, if not in the foreground, or lack of clarity is the kind of doubt that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about doubting, whether, who I should vote for president or something like that. This is a kind of lack of clarity that we sense. We're not seeing clearly, we're not experiencing clearly, and then all of a sudden something triggers an awakening. And we can't unsee what we've seen once we've seen it. You can't stuff the genie back into the bottle, right? The genie, once it's out, is beyond our ability to stuff back in. Nor would probably we want to. Why would we want to go back to delusion? Well, in the Matrix series, it talks a little bit about that. If life is full of a tremendous amount of suffering for us, and we just want to free ourselves, and we don't understand what the true way to free ourselves from that suffering is, then we may want to stuff it. And I think stuffing the feelings, stuffing the pain, stuffing the suffering in is a method that everybody uses unconsciously, if not consciously. But it doesn't stay in. I mean, sooner or later it comes out in situations that are intense or traumatic or difficult. Those situations often bring people, for instance, to practice, to initial practice. For me, it was the kind of suffering like that brought me when I was 17 years old to this practice. It wasn't exactly this practice, but it was meditation practice. For other people, it's a financial reversal, a health reversal, a relationship issue. Anything in life that causes suffering that we can't get a handle on, we can't work with it effectively, that makes us kind of ripe, if we have the karma of Zen or Buddhist practice, to make that transition. So Vasubandhu is engaged in what he considers Buddhist practice, and it is, the debate and the intellectual side and the heavy austerity. It looks like, it sounds like that he's engaging in. But freedom of mind is not dependent upon any particular methodology. Now, that doesn't mean that some things aren't proven to be pretty effective in setting up a situation for the mind to shift or awakening to occur. I believe that Zazen or Zen meditation is one of those means. But if we attach to that or we overdo it, to the exclusion of other things going on in our mind that need to be addressed, then we just go away from that freedom. We don't go towards it. And this is where Jayata makes this statement, several sentences long. I'll read it again because I think it's really beautiful. He says, I do not seek the way, but neither do I go against it. I do not worship Buddha, but neither am I haughty nor superficial. I do not sit long in meditation, but neither am I negligent. I may not eat just once a day, which, by the way, is what the Vinaya says you should do in certain instances. Yet I do not overindulge. Even though I do not know what enough is, I am not greedy. In my heart, there are no expectations. This is called the way. So what he's expressing here, this is a person who's free of attachment to any particular methodology, to Buddhism itself, to the Buddha. You know, the Buddha was a revered and worshipped figure during that time. That's why he says, and still is in certain countries, he says, I don't worship the Buddha. You know, he's not worshiping something outside of himself. So this is the statement of a really awakened person who, through his words and through this initial contact with Vasubandhu, awakens him to a certain reality, you know, to what freedom of mind truly is. And then something also happens, which I think is really wonderful, and it's kind of atypical in Buddhist literature of this time, because it talks kind of more about an emotional component. He says, Jayata says, I just curbed you in front of all of your followers. Did you attain to the state of not fretting about that in your heart of hearts? So, you know, Vasubandhu has claimed that he understands what Jayata is saying, and Jayata is testing him a little. You know, he's saying, did self-conscious ego arise when you were being dissed? Dissed by me, this guy that just wandered in from the north? In your heart of hearts, he says. In other words, don't just say it off the top. Really examine, is there something you're still attached to there? Are you still attached to being the teacher? Are you still attached to being the one who's correct? Are you still attached to the one that everyone looks up to, that thinks is superior in some, has a superior understanding in some way? Do you attach to that, or are you able to be one with what I'm saying without the ego self interfering? And that's not an easy thing, as we all know. Imagine you're in that situation. Excuse me. Imagine that you've spent years with all these followers, and you're the head guy or girl or woman, I'm sorry, the head man, the head woman. And all of a sudden, some person comes in who is obviously a powerful personality and has a certain amount of street cred, right? They have this rep as being this awakened person. I'm sure Jayata just didn't wander in without anyone knowing who or what he was. Can you then release your hold on your position to be ready to receive this awakened person's message, which could then free you from the grip of your own self, essentially, your own intrusive parts of self that keep you or me tied to the wheel of suffering, the wheel of causative suffering, causative suffering. So this kind of opens up a lot of cans of worms here. There's a lot of different aspects to it. So maybe I'll just open it up now to anything anyone would like to say or any questions about it.
So in your heart of hearts, that was interesting because I can just reflecting back on my own practice. There usually multiple layers within myself. I'm sure within all of us, right? And that heart in your heart of hearts. So at that layer underneath where the ego is trying to hide or cover up or show another face, underneath that, because we all have that. But under that, what's really going on? So that expression just kind of hit me, I guess. So I might sit with that one a little bit. So, but I enjoyed this stories. So where did this come from?
This was a source that I found online. It's a little different translation of the same piece that's in the Transmitting the Light. I can post it for people if they're interested.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I enjoyed it.
No, you're welcome. Yeah, that's a great thing to look at. You know, heart of hearts kind of implies going very deeply into who we are, what we really feel. And we have this expression in English. I'm kind of curious what the word was in Sanskrit that they use to interpret in that way or translate in that way. But ultimately, we all know what it's about. We all know that we, as Dave says, we can present a face to the public. You know, in the dialogue work, Hal Stone would call that the primary self. You know, the self that we present to everyone else. But the heart of heart kind of implies that we're going deeper than just the outer shell that we kind of often show the rest of the world as a form of defense against, in some cases, either really feeling who and what we are and what we feel, or not wanting to express it because of feeling vulnerable or because of the situation doesn't allow for it in some sense or another. We certainly have that at times. Anybody else?
Yeah, I feel like what the master was saying there is that like striving to be something or do something in itself is like not the way. But there had to be something that put you on the path to start with, which I suppose was some sort of suffering, which comes from an attachment. So this seems to be just an exercise in gradually shedding all of your attachments.
Well, yeah, I mean that's essentially what he's talking about here. I mean, he's not talking about not feeling or not experiencing. He's talking about feeling and experiencing freely, which I'm not sure we can experience ourselves and the universe around us, the world and the universe around us freely when we're highly attached to ideas about what it is we're seeing. So yes, I would agree with that. And the whole striving thing, I think there is often for practitioners of meditation or other spiritual paths, a time when there's striving more earlier on, until we reach a point where we realize that it's not fruitful to strive. You know, that it's actually, just as Jayata was saying here, it's sending Vasudandhu everywhere active. He's everywhere active, but sometimes overactivity is not the best way forward. We all know this. We all know that being overly active just is more agitating. It doesn't, in many instances, it doesn't really allow us to slow down to examine that heart of hearts that he's saying, that Jayata's saying here. So, Elizabeth, I see waving around. Oh,
Yeah.
she came in from the side.
Yeah, well, I was sitting here in Mike's room and really enjoyed the talk. Uh, it's great talk, and I had an experience. I've been doing this, being in a training, and uh, I expressed something in the train. It's a meditation and healing training, and I expressed something in the training um, when the teacher was leading. And this was kind of like a personal sharing of some difficulties that I have. And then during the next break, two people who were a lot younger than me, like a lot younger than me, kind of came up to share their thoughts about what I had spoken about. And I felt like that ego that you're saying, when the master asked him, did your ego kind of show up here when I kind of, pointed at you and poked at you in public? And I could feel that in me. I was very on the outside. I was very polite and tried to look gracious and thank you. But inside I was like, hey, I've been doing this twice as long as you've been alive. Don't tell me what to do. don't give me advice. But and then just kind of like having to notice that in me and be with it. And then when I just heard this the conversation about striving, I'm still doing this training, and it's been online, and I have a lot of resistance to it, and yet I'm doing it. And it's like, it's not, doesn't feel like striving. It just feels like, you know what, I'm just gonna sit here. I don't really want to be here.
Mm.
And because it would be easier to not be here and not have to watch my mind and it's the parts that are resisting, but I'm just gonna breathe through it and be here. And and finally it's like that persistence or commitment broke through. And last night I experienced that that kind of like maybe the awakening that you were describing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you can you comment like a difference between just striving and just hanging in there?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for sharing that. I think that only someone that has been meditating for a really long time is comfortable with being vulnerable and expressing what you were expressing. So I want to thank you for that. Sometimes people think it's the opposite, but I don't think that's true. Yeah, it depends what one means by just hanging out. I think ultimately that awareness, that being aware doesn't require striving, because it's just the foundation for life. Life is aware. All life is aware in some form, and all sentient beings, as we say in Zen, are aware. So, we have to look at, well, what are the qualities of the kind of awareness that we want to manifest that require some additional activity and on top of what we're already doing? And if so, what is that activity? Well, in Zen or other forms of spiritual practice, it's usually prescribed what the forms of activity are that get us to that place. But I think that when we have an awakening, when we look back, it's like, I'm not sure that 1 + 2 = 3, the 3 being the awakening. In other words, there's something miraculous or different about the shift that happens that is not actually even related to what we did before. I mean, we could, in retrospect, say that, yeah, I did this and this and this, and then this amazing thing happened, and I all of a sudden became more clear about this or that or whatever. But usually, if we look at it carefully, we can see that there is no causal link, because that awakening is kind of beyond the cause and effect sphere. It puts us into a place of direct experience, which is timeless and has no, I don't think, any contributing factors. In other words, awareness itself just is awareness.
Yeah. Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
I hear you, and I didn't say hanging out, like I wasn't just hanging out, but like hanging in, hanging in there.
Okay, maybe
And when I was listening to you, I realized that by hanging in there, what I meant was I was noticing the strong resistance in the parts that wanted to pull me out and say, just get up and leave. But it was like, no, notice, breathe, let go, and come back to the practice.
Okay, that's entirely different. I'm sorry.
So maybe that doesn't feel like striving, but it,
That's a
yeah.
good point. Yeah, sorry about that misunderstanding.
No,
No, I
it
mean,
helped me clarify
yeah.
what was going on.
Well, of course, what you're describing there is how we progress in any of this, I think, is by allowing ourselves to be uncomfortable with the apparently dissonant parts that are a form of resistance to what is. And to me, that is the practice. I assume whenever I sit that there's something I'm attached to, because there always is something that I'm attached to, and so working with that. And often we tend to, as just as organisms, as biological organisms, we tend to want to avoid the painful things, the uncomfortable things, but often that's exactly where we need to go to experience that awakening. I'm sure it wasn't easy for Vasubandhu to have someone come in and diss him in front of all his disciples, but he was somehow able to go beyond that and experience a huge awakening as a result of that teacher coming in and being what some might say obnoxious, but the point of it wasn't just to hurt or to be obnoxious, but to awaken. So it had a very different purpose to it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? How did this affect you in this whole?
This one.
Hi, Roshi. This is Lynn.
Good morning. I recognize the voice.
You recognize the voice, you did.
I've known it for many years now.
Yes. Still a student struggling to, well, I guess it touched something really deep in me, and it not just like, where's my ego? I mean, I'm not being very articulate here, but it kind of hit me from the sense of what's still standing in the way. What's there that's keeping me from just being in the place where we always are, but knowing that. And I mean, I find myself recently in a really fair amount of doubt about how I am as a practitioner, and what am I doing? And so I'm trying to stick kind of really close to the basics, and I keep in mind what Shunryu Suzuki said. He said, just sit and see what your experience is. And I'm trying to go to the cushion and wherever else that in the rest of my life, where I just try to practice with what's going on in my life and just go without expectations and go without some plan about how I want it to turn out, and just see what my experience is. But I mean, I could feel Vasudandhu with the, just the human kinds of things that come up all the time, and that those things make me doubt sometimes about what do I actually have. I remember the wife of one of our members who used to say, "Where's your Zen now?" Like, where is my Zen? What is my Zen? I mean, what have I got? What am I doing? Why? So thank you for this really intriguing little story. And it just, I don't know, I may have more doubt than I had before.
Well, then I've done my job. I hate to say it. Yeah, but of course, everything that Lynn was describing there is actually the activity of a pretty awakened practitioner in my experience. It really is. I mean, that's the path. She's describing it there. By the way, I posted the link in the chat to this piece if anyone's interested in reading it. I thought it was, I really liked the translation that was done. But yeah, I mean, certainty, and Maizumi Roshi used to talk about how the bodhisattva is the person that's willing, is the being who's willing to allow the mind of questioning, the mind of doubt to arise. So in all kinds of situations, are we willing to allow doubt to arise when it's apparent that we don't understand, or we're not clear, and then work with it in a form that works for us. For some people, it's meditation or dharma dialogue. For some, it's psychotherapy or friendship of some sort. Whatever it takes to clarify. But to be willing to allow ourselves to go into the process of doubting and the process of allowing teaching in is quite important in my view to going deeper. I had a situation about 12, 13, maybe 13, 14 years ago now, where I encountered someone who I realized was a teacher that I needed to work with, who was outside of the Buddhist realm. And it was not easy making that transition because I viewed myself in a certain way, and this person was highly challenging to that. I've had others since too that I've received tremendous teaching from, but it was not easy. And initially, in my heart of hearts, I was not receiving it fully. So receiving it fully in our heart of hearts means we've let go of who we think we are and just be in the situation. If there's teaching there, we will perceive it if we're in that state of letting go of who we think we are. But if we have if we're attached to a viewpoint, or if I am this, or I am the leader, or I am, something so special that nobody else is, then that will prevent us from receiving the teaching then. And evidently Vasudandhu was able to make that transition, at least according to the story. Who knows what really in his heart of hearts he experienced. But that's not the point of the story. Is for us to, in my view, to see what's in our heart of hearts, like Elizabeth was describing what was going on with the program she's involved in. Let's see, maybe we'll take one more person if anyone else has something. Angie.
I'm wondering now about how we might transition from thinking of a bodhisattva, or that's kind of got a lot of baggage. So maybe just a very strong practitioner. Maybe in the beginning we think, okay, that's somebody who has the answers, and then what we actually find in the course of our practice is, wow, that's somebody who's always asking questions and has a lot of doubt and is maybe comfortable with that. What do you think?
Yeah, perhaps. I don't know about having a lot of doubt, but someone who is willing to admit when they don't understand and go into it, or admit when they've created a situation themselves that they don't understand how to work with, and ask for help when they really need it, when they feel like they need it. That to me takes a highly developed person to do that. I was not that person at one point in my life. I thought I had what I needed to figure it all out, and I thought I'd figured a lot of it all out, and I found out I was very wrong. So you know, the opposite of what we're talking about is like the omnipotent guru or cult leader who understands everything and doesn't have problems. And I don't know, I've never met someone like that, really. I've met people that presented themselves as being that way, but then the ones that I got to know better, I realized, well, they were people just like I was, and they had their doubts and they had their problems. Some were more effective at working with those issues than others because they were willing to go into what it was and get help when they needed it from those who they felt could help. Some didn't. But yeah, I agree with you that is a good thing to look at, is what really is an awakened person. What are the characteristics of it? Is it this disembodied, unattached being that is like floating around on the throne? I don't think so, at least not for me. Maybe for you or somebody else, but not me. All right. Thank you, everyone. It was a really great discussion. Wonderful to see you all.
Thanks a lot. See you all next time.
Thanks, Rishon.
All right.